this later, but if you want to add to the program, please stand up so that the microphone will be sure and catch you. Before we start the program, I've got just a couple of announcements. By the way, welcome. It's going to be a fun evening. I just want to mention the Memorial Day Parade because it's very important to our town and to our history, and I hope everybody's going to turn out and see the parade and cheer on the Revolutionary Cavalry that the Historical Society is sponsoring. They're going to put on quite a show for us. They come with horses in full regalia, full costumes. There'll be people marching with them, and the horses that they use are all abused animals that they have taken. Mostly they have to buy them, and taken them from the people who didn't want them and abused them, and they bring them back to trust human beings again. And I think it's a wonderful use of these horses. So we want to go out and cheer them on. Immediately following the parade, of course, there's the ceremony in Memorial Park. Then we'll be down at the little cemetery on East Street for about an hour. And I understand that the Women's Club is having an open house at the fire department, and they're going to be having demos of the new, I can't remember the technical name of those cameras that everybody's helping to fund. So there's a lot of things to do, so don't let all the barbecues and barrels of beer and so forth get in your way. And for heaven's sakes, put your flag out. I don't care if it's 3 by 5, put a flag out. We're looking for loans of World War I material. That will be our subject this summer for our large display for the summer. World War I. There's not a lot around, but I bet some of you have got things in the attic. Should be pertaining to someone from this area. It doesn't have to be Plainville, but it certainly should be Connecticut. And I don't care if they started out from Connecticut or ended up in Connecticut. It doesn't make too much difference. During the summer, I would urge our members to think about fundraisers for the fall. Excuse the voice, this is the pollen season. And also try to think of people we can bring into the Historical Society. We very badly need some younger members. Our average member is getting up around the 80-year-old mark. I hope they're 80 degrees. We really need people who can climb ladders and help put up displays and so forth. You'd be surprised what we go through some days just to get a display changed. So if you can think of anybody that would enjoy being active, or if you are a member and you are not presently active, we would urge you to become active. And I'll now introduce you to our program chairman, Sue Millerick.
As program chairman, it's customary to introduce our speaker. Well, Woody does not need to be introduced, so let's give Woody a big hand.
Well, I say thank you for coming tonight. As you know, every year we put on a program, remembering Plainville, a little reminiscing about old Americana. This year we decided to put on the program covering the mom and pop stores in Plainville. I must thank Bob Cassidy, Mrs. Roserko, Barbara, my wife, daughter, Helen, Ruth, for helping me run down some of the mom and pop stores. I'm going to try to dress the part of a pop in the mom and pop era, as I recall when I went to the country store. The store master always dressed this way. Unfortunately, I ran out of white shirts and a black bow tie. But this is the way that I recall seeing the old storekeepers in my day. They used to wear these armbands so that a shirt would last them a week. It reminds me of in the Navy. The British Navy always wore white shirts with celluloid collars. So their shirts would last 1 month. Because all they had to do was wash the collar every night. The mom and pop stores we surveyed, and we came up with roughly 27 mom and pop stores in Plainville. This is an era that started almost with the start of America, United States, and lasted up through probably the 1950s. There are still, I believe, one store, one of the original stores still, or two of the original stores still active in Plainville. If you look on the map over there, I've taken a map of Plainville, and I've listed the location of every mom and pop store in Plainville. Ruth and I went around town and we photographed the location where all of these stores were. Why were there mom and pop stores? Primarily because of the economy. People were not very mobile. Back in the early part of the century, even up until World War II, people were not as mobile as they are now. Everyone did not have a car, so their shopping was pretty much done in their neighborhoods, or the merchant came around to their homes. So mom and pop stores served a purpose for the community. I'm going to take you through Plainville very, very rapidly and tell you where the stores were, and then I'm going to call on some people who are very close to some of these stores. I'm going to start at Ledge Road. That's over the eastern section of Plainville. Ledge Road and White Oaks, the corner there, was where the Fortuna family had their store. Later on we will hear from Rose Fortuna Coe, who will tell us about her dad's store. Coming down Woodford Avenue, we come to the Montner's store. Montner's, Palmer's, it's still a store now. I think it's probably one of the few still active mom and pop stores in Plainville. Corner of Linden and Woodford, Florence Marino had a store. That was in what was the dining hall of Tom's Tavern. The store went out and the dining hall came in. Then we go to Woodford Avenue in Kent, where Fred Tolai lived, and he had the store there in the front of his house. Then on Milford in Kent, there was a Henny's and the Bukaises, and the Battas had a store there. If you go by that house, it's right diagonally across the Linden Street, and you can see where the door was to a store there. Broad and East Street, Tom Naughton's store. Later, the Nazzo brothers opened their market. It's now the ice cream parlor. Broad and Whiting Street, we had Dave Kaufman and the Temple family. Al and Hilda Moss ran a store there, and the Rizzo family had a store. We go across the street diagonally where the restaurant is. We know, many of us know it as the Stick Snack, where Al and Hilda Moss ran a store, and later Curly Bichette. South Canal Street, that little house, we call it the Fox House now. It's a little tiny house. It was Deloy's, and Mr. Deloy had a candy store there. When all the kids go into Broad Street, get out of school, they'd run over to Deloy's house and buy a penny's worth of candy. On Church Street, if you go down Church Street, it's very obvious, there's a Killing store, because it's a home now, but you look at it and you know that at one time it was a store. Broad and South Washington, with the insurance company, everyone in town knows that that was Baradia's store. We will hear more about that store later on in the program. On West Main Street in Bohemia, way up at the west end of town, was Frank Hurlbut had a store. It's now, sign out says Gostin's Real Estate, but I'm not sure if it's even occupied. Coming down West Main Street, on the left side, there's a little purple or blue house there, and that's where Hugh Simpson sold, and his product was mostly meat. Coming down to 140 West Main Street, where there are condominiums now, that was Maskery's store. And before that, it was Jim Simpson, Maskery and Chamberlain, and then Maskery and his wife ran that store. And I recall that very well because I used to go there and buy boysenberries. I love them. They're great, like big, big raspberries. Directly across the street was Schaefer's Market, or Somers Market. And then there's a little brick building just east of that. I think the Chaper girl at one time opened up a little store in there, and then it became Hemingway's battery shop. And Hemingway sold batteries out of that store. Then we went up, going up North Washington Street, where most of us know it is Fulsick's store, was Nick Brokowski family moved in there. And we will hear from a daughter of Nick tonight more about that store. Then crossing town, way down the end of Farmington Avenue, we find a market there, and if I can get this paper open, I'll tell you what it was. It was Benicio's. Then on 51 East Main Street, and that would be where the old, I think the old town hotel was, something that I recall it primarily as Peter Carroll running a little store in there, and he sold tires. But before that was Ross and Cunningham had a store there. It's located, if you look on the map, it's just about right in there where the bank is on East Main Street. Going down a little further on East Main Street, where Louis or D'Antonio had a store, that was Nodes, N-O-A-D-S store, and later D'Antonio's. Now it's I don't know whether it's a bakery, florist shop is next door, but right in that area. As I said, down on Farmington Avenue, way down the end of Farmington Avenue was Louis Benicio, and before Louis, it was Stan Ledger's store, and later it became Farmington Motors. And New Britain Avenue and William Street, about where maybe that little restaurant is, just this side of where the barber shop was at one time, was a store there run by a family called Tators, T-A-T-O-R-S. Then going down New Britain Avenue, corner of New Britain Avenue and Crooked Street, was a store, Arrington's, somewhere in the area where the basket shop is now. Then we go down Whitey Street, down the south end of town, and on Hillside Avenue, and Hillside Avenue is off Whitey, just around the corner, there's a little tiny red house, and that was where Izzy's had a store there. Down on Hart's Corner was Torrero's Market, and Bonnie dropped down to the house today and showed me a couple of pictures. It's quite interesting. Here's the Hart's Corner Market, and this ran until 1942. It was run by the Torrero family, and then Bonnie Torrero and her husband, Camp, ran that until 1942. This picture shows an old truck that says Hart's Corner Market on it. Very interesting picture. This is a picture of the front of the store showing packed baskets of fruit piled out in front of the store, and this shows the girls packing it. And there's another picture of the two girls, and they were both beautiful girls, in the truck. I will have these on display afterwards if anybody would like to see these. I thought Bonnie was going to be here tonight. Is she here? I guess she didn't. She was very bashful. I couldn't get her to talk. Then right across from there at Hart's Corner was a little store there. When I first came here, I think Woody Severio had a little store in there. It sold gas and cigarettes and a few groceries, and later on it was run by Art Wers, and before Woody Severio it was run by a Mr. Felix. Coming down Whiting Street 118, and that's a little shop now that I believe sells theater, stage equipment. That's where John Celino, Pat Foran, Bill Foran, and John Celino had a store. John later moved from there down to his present location where the oil company is. Then on 156 Whiting Street, still looking very, very much like a store, on the right-hand side is the Zenzo's store. I think it's a little office in there now, but it still looks like a little store. Then coming down Whiting almost to the center of the town was where Ralph Manella had his market, and that's where the jeweler shop is now. We did not cover the main stores in the center of Plainville. There's one other store on East Street. It's just before you get to Hart's Corner on the left. It was run by Keiko's. Some of you will remember we're in school with George Keiko. His mom and pop ran that store. And later the Pettit family ran that. It is now, I think, they repair washing machines and electrical stuff. That gives you a geographical rundown of where the mom and pop stores were playing. I don't want to go on and tell you any more about them. I'm a carpetbagger. I'm not a native, so I would rather call on natives to tell what they can about their mom and pop stores that their mom and pops ran. And first, I'm going to call on Rose Fortuna Cope, who is the daughter of the Fortuna family who ran the store over the corner of Ledge Road in Woodford. Rose? I want you to check to see if this mic is on. Rose, step right up there and talk in there. You may sing if you wish.
I'll introduce myself.
Can you hear her?
I'm Rose Copey. Rose Fortuna.
Turn volume up.
B-O-L-U-M-E.
Plug it in.
There's one in every family.
Name is Walter.
I don't know whether this is on. We're having technical difficulties on the home front. I don't think it was on when you were speaking, Bruce.
Power's on. I can find the darn knob.
It's on.
Yeah, now we gotta find out how to turn it down.
Right here at the bottom.
All right, we'll turn it down. Yeah, that was testing all right.
Right there. Okay, tap it.
I turned it back on.
I turned it on then. I got the volume.
Oh, it sounds good. That should be good.
I was booed before I started to speak. I'm Rose Fortuna Copey. I'm the youngest of the Fortuna family, the youngest. My father was Giulio Fortuna, coming over from Italy. When he came over, he settled in Waterbury. From Waterbury, he came up to White's Crossing in Plainville. He built 3 houses on the corner. Swag had the farm across the street. And the first house was Mountain View, underneath Sunset Rock. They used to call it Mountain View. He built a house there and helped many people coming over from Italy because he had built a 2-family house, large house. It still stands there, by the way. Then when we moved to White's Crossing and he built the 3 houses on the corner, 2 cobblestone, and one stucco. Now, this picture over here of our store, the first store was in the cobblestone house next to Carabians, where Carabians live today. Well, the first store was in that cellar. Then when the cobblestone house on the corner was destroyed, where I was born, was destroyed by fire by one of the tenants that my dad had rented to. There were they still stand there, by the way, 2 cobblestone houses and a stucco house right on the corner. Then, from there, he built this large home. It was Crooked Street then, called Crooked Street, a brick home, and we moved into that home. From White's Crossing, we went down to Crooked Street, and that was a tapestry brick home. Then the state took it over, destroyed the beautiful home to put a highway through. From there, my dad met Bob White, and Bob White sold him quite a few lots on School Street. So from the big house, the large house on Crooked Street, we moved to down on School Street. My dad bought many lots from Bob White, and of course my brother was working with him. My brother was a carpenter, but they built many, many cobblestone cellars in Plainville, and also he did a lot of work in Farmington, and they used to dig the cellars by hand, and you had to be very careful of the sand in Plainville sinking into the cellars. And when the Crooked Street house was taken over by the state, we came down on School Street, and my dad and brother built about 10 houses on School Street, and then around the corner on Locust Street, he built a couple of houses there. And of course, he built one of Tolai's houses. Rizzo was a shoemaker in Plainville. He built one of those. And on Farmington Avenue, next to the Confetti restaurant, that cobblestone house, I remember that because my mother used to tell my father to take the little one with him, me, and he used to sit me on the bank there. That's how I remember that house, right next to Confetti's. It still stands there, by the way. And on School Street, my dad passed away in 1938. He passed away. So then my brother finished building the houses on School Street. By the way, he built Bergenti's house too. I have a picture of my dad standing in front of the house after he had finished. Bill Bergenti's house, I remember when he sold it. He was the original owner of that house. He did a lot of work in Farmington, a lot of mason work in Farmington. And this first picture here of this brick building, that was built, what you took a picture of now, that was the second location of our store. The first one was in the rear, in the little cobblestone in the cellar. And then after the cobblestone house was burnt down, he built this building, and we moved the store into this building with a tenement up above. That was where the store was located the last. Yes, he built many cobblestone, stucco, and brick. He made a lot of friends in Plainville. I remember the Tolais, the Rizzos, and Casilles, and almost all Italians. So that was, and then I just, whoops. This was the cobblestone house that was destroyed by fire. They asked me to bring the picture in, and this was my dad a year before he passed away. There's a picture of the cobblestone house where I was born.
I think I'm gonna fall for you too.
Cobblestone, right there. That's the only picture right there. The cobblestone house.
And
right
that's
there.
where
This is the
original
cobblestone
store.
house that I was born in. And then that building was built after the house was destroyed by fire. And this was a picture of my dad before, a year before he passed away, 1937.
Thank you.
Thank
Lois,
you very much.
How about the credit those days? Did you trust anybody in the store?
Well, everybody used to charge, and some of them paid at the end of the week. Very few. After we closed up the store, I used to go around, especially down Mountain View, under the Sunset Rock. They used to call it Mountain View. I used to go down on Saturday morning to try and collect some of our accounts. We had a big, thick book. And then I used to have to walk way up, it's now Ledge Road. I used to walk up to Ledge Road, way, way up, where, oh God, who lived up there then? Johnson, that murdered his wife. Johnston up there, way, way up Ledge Road. I used to have to walk up there and go around and try. Some would hide. They wouldn't answer the door. And of course, I was a young girl, and they figured, oh, we won't bother giving her anything. Some would give me 50 cents. Some would give me $1. Well, when we closed up the store, we had a lot of money coming to us because we trusted everyone. You know, people in those days, most of them were good for their word. And I remember my father used to do business with a handshake. Today you have to get an attorney. Yeah, it was a handshake. And he used to pay the help in the truck. He used to pay the help. And it's a big difference. Well, thank you all for listening.
I don't know whether a lot of you people noticed, but Rose was a pretty good ballroom dancer on the day. She got restless feet when she didn't finish high school here, I don't think, and she lit out for New York, and she ended up dancing with Fred Astaire.
I trained with him for 3 years.
For 3 years, yeah. Then she opened 3 dance schools. She had one in Springfield, one in New Haven, and one in Hartford, and she could still kick it a little bit. That's all.
I might say, because of the credit many of the store owners used to give, many of them became very, very wealthy landowners because they took the land in exchange for their bills, and many of them acquired a tremendous amount of property in small communities throughout New England. Remember, we have to realize that our economy was not good, really, all through the 30s, up until World War II. Until World War II, starting with us in 1941, we were an economy, a very, very deep depression. And I don't know how many families would have survived had it not been for these little mom and pop stores that carried people on credit on a paper bag. The next one that I'm going to call on is the son, a grandson of the Varieties who ran the mom and pop store on the corner of Washington and Broad. The daughter, Jean Berardi Munson is here, and her son Stephen will relate some of the experiences of the Berardi store and his grandfather on Broad Washington. Stephen?
I'd like to extend a note of thanks to the Historical Society and Ivan Wood for inviting us out here tonight. What I'd like to do is I'm just going to pass this picture around. This actually is in my kitchen today. This was taken, my mom had this done over for me and received it for a 5th year wedding present. And this is in my kitchen in my home right now, so I'd like to pass that around. Anthony Berardi was born in Bretole, Italy in 1899. Passed away in 1983. I remember that day because it was senior skip day for me at Plainville High School. He came to this country at the age of 19, resided in New Britain for a short period of time, and then came to Plainville, where he lived for a good period of 60 years. He basically, in terms of some of the memories that I had of him, I was a young fella, and particularly with the store, is he owned and operated the store from the late 1930s to the late 70s. We don't have the precise dates, but it was generally in that period. Some of the memories that I had were just, as a small child going in there with mom and dad. My folks had actually had lived on the top floor. We're going into the store. The penny sales were popular in that day with a lot of the young kids from the grammar schools, and that was something that my mom had told me about. Customers would call in, their grocery lists, and they would be delivered with some of the same things that Rose had mentioned in terms of credit. Since having conversations with mom, told me about he would always, extend credit, and then he would have the young fellas go out and pick potatoes for him, or just do, general labor around his store for him to work off their debt. He had a thing that my mom has. It's a little brochure, a pamphlet that was hung on your refrigerator. You would check off the items that you wanted, bring it into the store, and then he would pack those groceries up for you, have them delivered. My father, kind of not being an Italian, had to kind of work his way into the hearts of his in-laws, so he used to do a lot of delivery of foods for him, loaves of bread and so forth. During the Depression era, I know that folks that had known him said that he was a very generous man in terms of helping get people through troubled times. Very kind and loving man. My fond memories of him are spending Saturdays over at his house. I used to spend quite a bit of time over there, waking up to big lunches and brunches with my grandmother, who was always had the table filled with treats for the family. My parents would come and pick me up after a night on the town with Mr. Wood and some of the other fellas here in town. They would come and pick me up on Sundays, and we would sit down and have a nice meal. I have a memory of him, and he had a heart-shaped tattoo on his arm with an arrow through it that I used to make fun of, and then at some point told him that I was thinking about getting one myself someday. Helping him out in his garden, picking tomatoes. His daughters, Joan Berardi and Jean Munson, occasionally worked for him, although they were preoccupied with dance schools. My grandfather owned 3 homes down at Sound View on Swan Avenue, and they used to spend quite a bit of time down there. In terms of his life, I think that it's been a good experience for me to kind of go back and do some research. I can't obviously say that I was here firsthand to witness it, but my folks had always done a very good job of kind of letting me, filling me in and kind of explaining a lot about my grandfather when I was a child growing up. So a lot of the a lot of the things that, although I did not witness firsthand, I had a pretty good idea in my mind of, of what he was all about and how he operated his store. And this experience tonight has given me an opportunity to really, look into this and, learn more about my grandfather. If he were alive today, he would have 7 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, and him, I look at him kind of starting our whole family. There's 28 of us right now between the Santa Cruzes and the Munson family, so I kind of honor him in the fact that he kind of started this whole thing with us and brought, my mom into the world, and, that's very important to me, obviously, as well. I don't know, Mom, Duke, would you like to just speak about just some of your experiences at the store that you kind of witnessed firsthand that you'd like to just make mention of?
Well, you pretty much covered everything. I do remember a lot of, like you mentioned, boys on the front porch of the store, and they used to fill these enormous bags of potatoes. That's something, I don't know why, I always remember that, and you come in and buy this big bag of potatoes. I guess that was an important commodity. And I remember also, which previous speaker mentioned, little books, little Visa cards in those days.
We actually brought one of those books with us. Yeah.
This one is a little memo type of thing, but these were, he had a little cabinet, and they were all listed alphabetically. People would come in, he'd write down, and like she also said, you were lucky if you got a few bucks. And they come in, buy, and then pay a few, and I was part of that too. I had my book. When he sold the store, he ripped up my book and my sister's book. That was our gift. I don't know how many other people he did that for, but I would doubt if there was a lot. I remember so many silly things, like someone once cooking chicken legs and bringing them back and said they weren't good. He took them back. So, and then the penny candy, I was very, very popular because of the penny candy. Kids would all rush in after school to buy their candy, and also he had cookie bins that you got the cookies out of. And of course, we lived over, so again, my popularity was based on I would have someone over, we'd go through the back entrance and get whipped cream, then decide what to put it on. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
I certainly remember as a kid going to these penny stores, you'd have 1 penny to spend during recess, walk across the street to school and take you the entire recess period with 1 penny to look out for all the candies and see how many pieces of candy you could get for a penny. We also had a lot of favorite names for some of these store people. I remember the local baker in town, we called him Rubber Crust. So we had, yes.
Woody, we should have people come up front if they want to speak because we're not picking them up in the back of the room.
Okay. The next speaker I have is Helen Brokowski. You know her as Helen Briganti, and she will talk about her dad's store out on North Washington Street. Many of you who are not native will remember this as just a Fosick store. Helen?
Thank you, Ivan. Good evening. What I know about my folks. I started to reminisce about my mother and dad, and I thought, well, maybe I better go to the town hall and check some things out. Because what I remember was my mother and dad were from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. My father married my mother when she was 18 years old. That was 1918, and they came to Plainville, Connecticut. So I thought, well, gee, what brought them to Plainville, Connecticut? So as I looked through the land records today, I found out that my grandparents were here in Connecticut since, I have to go back to Farmington records. So what does that, Ruth, 1869? So I could go back, to 1869, and I couldn't find where my grandfather acquired the property, so they told me at the town clerk's office that I should go to Farmington to check it out. And I'm going to now because I never bothered before I even asked me to speak. So anyway, so when they came to Plainville, Connecticut, they must have lived with my grandparents, and that was on North Washington Street. And then in 1923 is when my grandmother passed away, and the property was put into my father's name and my grandfather's name. And so I believe that's when he built the store with the house attached to it, or the store attached to the house. And of course they raised their own chickens and ducks and vegetables. And what I remember about the chickens were when he'd kill the chickens, we'd have to dunk them in hot water and take the feathers off. Oh, that was terrible. But so I also I found some old pictures, and I went to the executive shop here in town and asked them to enlarge them for tonight. And when he saw the picture of my father next to his truck, he said, well, he was a huckster. Because my father used to take the truck and go to all the farms and sell the groceries right off the trucks. And I don't know how he refrigerated the meats or anything in those days. But this truck, he had a little box of patent medicines, you know, with aspirin and so forth in it. And he also had a penny box. So when he'd go to the farmhouse, if the children were good, well, the mother and father would let them, you know, have some candy. So one day my father, now these are stories my father told me. If they're true or not, I don't know. But anyway, one day my father said that he went to this particular home, and the mother came out and she was furious because the son got so sick from the penny candy that he had purchased. The mother bought the penny candy, but this little boy used to steal the candy from my father. And what must have happened, he said, when he went over a bump, that patent medicine box, being next to the penny box, a box of X-Lax fell in it. Now, I don't know if my father told me that story so that I would never steal, or if it were true, but that's the story he told me. I'm going to pass these around, too. This is of my dad with the truck, and here's the corner. This is the store. I had to call my sister-in-law in Florida for these pictures because when my folks died and the property was sold, my sister and I were too young to, get the pictures and so forth. So my sister-in-law sent these from Florida. By the way, his truck was a Model T Ford, and I don't know why, but he called the truck a her. She made it another day. I don't know why they call trucks women. Okay. Oh, all right. Now, you know where the town dump is today? Okay. My father owned that property also. And there was a beautiful pond down there. And in the wintertime, they would go down with a horse and sleigh, and they would cut the ice on the pond. And then they'd bring the ice to the ice house behind the store and pack it in sawdust. And that's how they refrigerated the store, the meat showcases all summer. And I do remember that. That wasn't a story. Okay, and of course, when you can see the picture, you sold everything in your mom and pop store. Kerosene and fresh meats, patent medicine, and everything came in bulk. Remember the pickles in the barrel? And then the vinegar. I hated when somebody came in and wanted vinegar, because I'd have to go down the cellar and siphon it out of the big barrel, and you always got a mouthful of vinegar. That I remember. Okay. Oh, and we also sold gas at our store. So, and it was Saucony, which is now Mobile, the flying red horse. And the gas sold for 18 cents a gallon. That must have been high test, because there's 15 and 16 cents. And when we were talking about charges for groceries, well, evidently, they had gas credit cards, because I just asked for the magnifying glass to see what that sign said, and it says credit card. So people were able to charge their gas. I don't know what year that was, though. Anybody have any idea when they had credit cards started for gas? No? Okay. Okay. Getting to the gas pumps. Well, I remember going out waiting on customers, pumping the gas, and then I'd go in the store, and I can't remember if I ever washed my hands when I sliced the bologna for the next customer. We all had our chores to do in the store, and I do remember my father it was my job to sweep the store, and he always said, don't ever sweep out when you have to sweep in. You sweep the customers into the store. So that I remember. And on 4th of July, he always had a lot of fireworks, and where the package store is and the dairy farms now it was a knoll, and he used to buy all kinds of fireworks, and all the neighbors used to come, and he'd put on a firework display. And of course, the store was open 7 days a week, from 6 in the morning till 11 at night. We never knew what it was to go to the beach or anything like that. If we were good, he'd spray us with a hose, and that was a big treat on a Sunday. I'll talk about the charge cards. Not charge cards, but the charging. We too had neighbors that charged. And then after, when the First National and the A&P opened, and everybody, of course, it cost less to go to the big store. But there were a few families, and one in particular, the Perrin family, if anybody remembers them in town. Mr. Perrin, I don't know if there were 12 or 13 children. And after, when things start getting a little bit better financially, I can remember them saying, or my mother saying, they are the true customers because they had 2 books. One book was the old account, and he'd give $2 a week towards that, and then the weekly account, and he'd pay that every week. And then another person that I didn't realize that my folks did things for was George Stevenson. I went to a seminar at Yale one time, and George was working for the state of Connecticut at the time, and he introduced me to some gentleman. He put his arm around me and he said, if it weren't for this gal's mother and dad, we wouldn't have ate, when things were tough. And so, I really thought that was great. Then he added, he said, of course, we moved from one apartment to another because we had to go to the next store and charge again. So when you said you never collected, maybe George Stevenson was one of those. And then, my father passed away in 1940. He was 45 years old, and my mother died in 1945. And we stayed at the store for a few years, and my sister tried to run the store, in which she was unable to do that. And so the property was sold, and it was sold to Peter Folsick. And Pete, was that in 48 or 49? Do you remember?
49.
49. And that's my story.
Good Friday.
Thank you. I was really listening. There's a lot of other stories I could tell, I'm sure. But
Peter, stand up. Peter is the one
yes.
who took over the Bukowski
Oh.
store.
Peter brought this tonight, and I remember it. I can see those cornflakes and those Rice Krispies. We used to have to get them off the shelf. And this is from the original store. He paid $18,000 for this, didn't you, Peter?
To wind up the program, before I open it up to the public, a few minutes, I'd like to call on Bob Cassidy. Bob is a kid that lived pretty much in the center of Plainville, and he went with his dad. His dad carried ice for a long time, and Bob, as a kid, used to ride with his dad when his dad was delivering ice to the mom and pop stores in the summertime. Bob also, as a kid, rode with Mr. Burns up on Redstone Hill, and he delivered milk all over Plainville. And that's how he got his milk and his rosy cheeks. He also used to ride with Mr. Simons, who drove one of Roger's bakery trucks. And Bob used to ride with him all day long so that he could get the broken cookies when he got home at night. So Bob will reminisce for a few minutes on what it was like riding with his dad delivering to these 27 stores. Bob?
Franny, who does Woody look like? Doc Matson or Mickey Levine with that hat and everything?
Doc Matson.
It seems Franny and I kind of retired last year, and I said, lay off for a while. So Woody, but I can't refuse Woody. I go back 60 years of Woody when he first came to town, and we're almost like brothers. I feel in my heart, and I can't never refuse anything to do for him. But we sat in this house one winter, and he's got a very comfortable room there. We went over the whole mom and pop stores that I can remember. I think there were 80 stores earlier than the 39, it was in the 20s, because I remember Katie McCarthy, the school teacher, used to send us kids over. That was a big thing to buy salmon for the cat, and that was a treat to get out of school for 5 or 10 minutes. But as Woody said, with myself, how I knew all these things. I did. I go to Walter Simon's, and then Jimmy Burns, the old man, Mr. Burns, picked me up in the wagon. We'd go around town. Then later it was Art Burns with the truck, and I'd always get a bottle of milk or something. And that's how I got to know the town, but I went with my father in particular. So I'm only going to take a few minutes because I don't want to be detaining you so much, but thank God I have a good memory yet. I'm not developing anything that I can't remember. But I do remember one part of the town. That's what he said. Those are tough times, depression, in the late 20s and early 30s. And I can remember going to some of these stores and had 3 cans of tomato soup on there, kind of like Mrs. Marino or Mrs. DeZenzo. And, that's the way they lived. And what he said, they parlayed to it and buy a lot of property. And I can remember Tony Brady store, we used to big thing, the penny candy. You try to get these little mints there, and you buy one. If you got a pink center, you got an extra one or a 5 or something like that. I remember that was one of the tricks to get the kids spending the pennies. But as I say, I used to ride to town with, I can remember Walter Simon's from the bakery, getting home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and Walter would bring me in front of the house, and they would give me the cookies and some cupcakes, whatever. But that's how I learned the town. And my cousin Ray, he drove for Mickey Levine and Charlie Marwitz. He was a left-handed butcher back in the late 20s and early 30s. That's how I knew about Ledger up on Farmington Avenue. He had a little store there, and I always get a hot dog and a pop from him. And I rode around with Ray too. So I said that way there. I knew the town. That's why today I see somebody sometimes face. I said, "Where'd you live?" When they say, "Well, 174 Whitey," should claim to fix me who they are. But just briefly tell you about my father. The other day I told Woody about it. I said that's how I really picked up all this when I used to travel with my father back in the late 20s when he drove a horse and wagon. Later on he went to a Rio truck. And vivid, good memories of those days. And my father worked for the Norton Ice Company, which was down on Britton Avenue. And the owner at that time was a man by the name of Herb Liebert. The original owner, Mr. Norton, had passed away. Now, at that time, there was 2 Norton Ice Companies in Plainville. There's on Britton Avenue and the other one, Art Norton it was. And you could travel the ice man, he'd go look in the window and there'd be a sign there, and whatever was 20 pounds, 40 pounds, whatever. And the green card was the other Norton, the white card was the Norton down there. And as I said, I traveled the whole time with my father, and this kid from the Britton Herald called me the other day, and he said, "Where'd they put the ice?" Now here's how the generations are separate. And I said, in an ice box. He said, "What the heck is an ice box?" Well, I should have said, "From the historical center." They got one here. But I had explained to what an ice box was. Where they put in the top. What happens how does it drain? And I said, they have a tube there, and it goes down underneath the ice box, and they have a big pan there, and you empty it in the morning. Now, Bertie Norton said the first thing you got to do, you had to empty the water, the bucket underneath the refrigerator. I don't want to be ice box. I didn't want to say to Bertie, "How about the chamber pot? Where did you empty that?" For those two. That was how they got. That's how they kept the food cool in those days. Helen had a little bit on it too, what she was saying about the back of her place. But my father drove street after street after street. I can remember when he died, he had the ice tongs that fixed. We threw all those things away, and they used to wear the rubber pants and wore over the shoulder. And I can remember my father sometimes going 3 flights upstairs and carrying 30, 40 pounds of ice. And the sad part about it was Depression Day. It was also Prohibition Day, which is probably the worst time in our history was when they put a prohibition through. Because see, every house my father went to, help yourself, Tommy, and it was always wine or beer. So my father got home at night, he bought just a vodka at home. And I always thought it was only the Irish and the Italians that drank. The Italians mind the Irish, but it wasn't like heck. There was a lot of the old Yankees and others that had their own homemade brew there in those days. And that's what Tommy used to do. If I'd come home, he was such an even-mannered man. He played ball. He was good friends with the Cunningham, Franny Cunningham's father, and the Cadrains and all them. And he used to, in the hot summer days, he used to, before he went, he'd chop the ice up. So the kids would crowd around and have a piece of ice, you know. And he did it day after day. And my grandmother used to say, the one thing about Tommy Cassidy, she never heard a cuss word in his life. Never did. He had a tough life. And one sad part about it, my father, and I think maybe Barbara Schubert or Zerk would remember it. It was the late 20s or early 30s, and they harvest ice down here at Norton Pond, which where the condos are now, and later became Harrison Lumber. And they had a big chute out there where they cut the ice. They cut it in big chunks, and they hauled it into the ice house, and there was a chute up there, and they would carry the ice into there, and they'd pack it in with straw and salt, whatever, to keep it for the winter. And this particular day, my father came back from hauling wood. He used to go up and haul wood for Lieberg. Kept them busy in the wintertime. And this particular day, the elevator got stuck, so my father gets off. He goes up there halfway, because he was kind of on the athletic side. He liked to play ball. And he was thin, not built like me. And he went up there to get loose in it. And all of a sudden, whoever's running it, turned the switch on, and my father got caught. He got right across here. How he lived, I don't know. To the day he died, he had a big scar across him. And he was out of work for months. But talk about the good people in those days. Mr. Lieberg, every Friday night, came to the house and always had his pay. And he did that for maybe 6-7 months. And as I said, my father at that time had seven kids. You can imagine during the Depression, 1929, 31, to have a family like that, big family like that, and no means of support. It was altogether different today, Social Security, compensation, all that. But that was a life he had. He always worked hard, but that was a life of the iceman. I think shortly after, maybe 3 or 4 years, I think the ice business went to pot because everybody's getting the refrigerators. But besides the Nortons, there was Jim Elliott started off as an ice company too, the Economy Ice, and his card was a red and white card. But that's how I got to know Plainville when I was a kid and went everywhere. And seemed every little mom and pop store I went. I got a candy bar or an ice cream cone or something like that. So that's my vivid memories. That's why when Woody sat down back in that cold winter day in January, I can remember just about all these stores here. But it was as Woody said, and I said before, these mom and pop stores, a lot of people survive because of them. And the fellow called me up today and he said, make sure you mention the book. Well, that's what everybody's been talking about. They called this the book. And I can remember where my mother traded. I remember the A&P down here in town, Bill's Angles. Every time I'd go down to pay the bill on Saturday, you always got a bag of candy. And I'm sure the Brady's, the Burkowskis, and the Furtons, all the kid went in there. I guess they gave a few pieces of candy because he paid the bill. They're so glad. Those are good memories. But if you should read the book, and I'm going to close on this. If you haven't done it, you should read this book, The Greatest Generation. I'm sure most of you have by Tom Brokaw. And that was our generation, and his crew was the greatest generation. What they went through. There's a follow-up on that book, but I know Woody read it, and I know others did. But Brokaw talked about the greatest generation. Don't get what we went through. Not only the Depression, we went through a great war. And the patriotism, I think that was the really true patriotism in this country. It is not like that anymore. No more flag waving, and you can see it on your parades and everything else. And you should read that book. Those who understand our generation. And what they went through, wars, and then of course after that came the atomic bomb and so forth and so on. You wouldn't have the Social Security if it wasn't for that generation. Harry Truman and Roosevelt. It was a tough times. And you're looking around this room here, and most of us in this room are in that bracket there, 60s, 70s, and some head into the 80s. But try to read that book, The Greatest Generation. You look in the room tonight, most of us are the greatest generation. I believe so anyway. So thanks for giving me time.
Now we have a few minutes if anyone in the audience would like to recall any experiences they might have had with a mom and pop store. Mr. Majak.
You're going to go up there?
Yes.
Being a lot younger than Woody and Bob, I don't know all those old-time stories, but there is a lot of pop stories I can tell. mentioned variety store. When we were kids, we were friendly with Fred and Caddy Hurl. And we'd go to church on Sunday, parents give us a nickel. We'd go to variety store, change it for 5 pennies, get 2 pieces of candy, put 3 cents in the basket. Now we talk about Helen Bruskowski. Being Polish, if I was Polish, used to go around all the Polish people, did a great business, did communicate. One time he called me aside, he said, you know, tell your mother to buy more stuff, I'll give you candy. And I told him, buy this, buy that. So once you take candy, they took 2 pieces. You got 2? I said, no, they stuck together. He took them apart and only gave me 1. And another great Pop's Corner store wasn't mentioned was originally Norton's Corner Store on Broad and East Street, then later taken over by Nassau. And everyone used to gather there, and being an only child, not have brothers and sisters, I always hung out there. And Norton had 2 beautiful daughters, so all the guys hung around there. Then in the neighborhood we had the Easton sisters, they were pretty. And Kay Wood was there, she was the doll of the bunch. But there was more stories going on. And also my father worked Trumbull's. And what we did all during the week, my mother charged stuff, or I had permission to buy 1 5-cent ice cream cone. And when he got his check on Friday, he went to the store, cashed the check, paid off the bill, and then took the rest of it home. But then when Nassau's took over, they knew nothing about the business, but they carried on the thing. I remember going and asking for a soup bone and other things, and things were really tough. But one thing, we were all poor. We didn't know any better. And like now you got different classes and all that, but you know, they helped each other. If someone didn't have it, they pal out. Pete Falchuk, I remember my father used to hang out there too, and he goes way back. His mother had a bakery in Southington, but the Pop stores are really missed, and it's a great memory of my life. Thank you.
Braden Tompkins, and he's a real old resident of Plainville. Braden, you'll have to come up here and use the mic.
I just have a question, that's all. Back in the late 20s, went to the Broad Street School, and we used to go to a little store on Church Street.
Killing, Bud Killing.
And I wondered who ran that, and what you knew about it.
They call it Papa Fox's.
What is it?
Papa Fox.
Papa Fox's. It was a Killing store on the other son, Bud Killing, went to school with my wife. If you go by on Church Street today, you will see the little house. You can see the picture of it here. It's now a home, but it looks like a store, very much like a store. Anyone else like to relate their experiences?
Can I add something?
You can add, subtract, or divide.
I just wanted to say that being on a state highway, when it would snow, the state trucks would come to plow the street, and they'd come in with their plow down into my mother's yard, because after my dad died, and they'd plow her yard by the pumps, and she'd give them a couple pints of liquor, and they did it every time. Black velvet, I think it was.
Recalling the mom and pop store in my days, I think you recall the big counters with a big wheel of cheese in every store. And as a kid, you would go up to them and say, when that is over, can I have that cheese box? Because on that cheese box, I could make a beautiful toboggan out of it. They used to have that big glass jar with the pickled eggs in water glass. The old jug full of sour pickles. A nickel, you'd get a sour pickle about that long, and that'd last you all day long. There were so many great things about those mom and pop stores. It's Americana that probably will never come back again. It's too bad. But we are very, very fortunate. We lived through those eras. And I'm a great believer in history. And I really believe that we're destined for trouble in the near future in our society, because all great nations, when they get morally low, as we are, and we're not as low morally as any nation in the world can get. And when we get that low morally, nations have gone down the drain, and I think we're headed because of our morals. Thank you very much for showing up. And one more question. We will be running another I Remember of Plainville, and if you have any suggestions or anything you would like to discuss for next May, please let me know, because I'm going to be around. The great my father told me I could go 9 innings, go into extra innings, and then I'm on my own. So,